Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from 15th of June, 1900. And this article is entitled Lives of Our Leaders, the Apostles, George Teasdale. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I know significantly more about Brigham Young Jr. than I do about George Teasdale. The reason being, the project that I had worked on before that I have mentioned in the past is I was writing articles about 20 of the least known apostles. George Teasdale wasn't on the list. He was one of those that was like in the bottom 40, but he wasn't in the bottom 20. And that's why I didn't actually research him at all. And so now I feel kind of bad that I don't know anything about him except for the fact that he was an apostle. So it looks like we are going to be learning something together, yes? So let's take a look. That the Lord loves humility and integrity in men was evident when he, through his servants, chose George Teasdale to be an apostle. Like most of his colleagues, the subject of this sketch rose from the humblest ranks in the church, and with fidelity he has performed every duty resting upon him in his calling. Elder Teasdale's nature is intensely spiritual. When asked recently by the writer to what he attributed his success in the ministry, he replied, "To the fact that I have always tried to find out the will of the Lord and then do it." I like that. I have tried to trust in the Lord and do good and honor him in tithes and offerings. Okay. Those who know Elder Teasdale will see in these sentences the thought which is uppermost in his mind. As president of missions in the world, he has endeavored to be directed in all that he did by the Spirit of the Lord. And the following incidents, which are but two out of the many which might be related, show how well he succeeded. A Danish brother was called to go on a mission to Germany. He could not understand why he should be sent to that land, where he would have another language to learn, when there was such great need of elders in his native country. Upon his arrival at Liverpool, he stated the case to President Teasdale, thinking, of course, his mission would be changed to Denmark. Brother Teasdale thought a moment, and then said, "You go to Germany in accordance with your call." The elder, of course, did so, and the wisdom of the decision was made manifest before he had been there many months. He was sent into Schleswig-Holstein, where he became acquainted with a number of Scandinavians, who had come into the country to work on a big canal which was being constructed, and through him, directly or indirectly, many people were brought into the church. It is not at all likely that he could have made as many converts had his mission been changed to Denmark. That's kind of cool. I like that story. I feel like that's kind of every missionary would like to have that moment. This moment of, see, you individually were needed in this specific place. But not everybody gets that. But either way, all missionaries do good work. I like to say all. Almost all. Almost exclusively all. On another occasion, he appointed an elder to go to a certain field. After he had done so, a feeling came over him that he had made a mistake, and he at once changed the appointment to another place. Upon his making known to the elder that a change had been decided upon, he exclaimed, "That is right. I knew I should not go to the other place." It developed later that a sister who lived in the field where it had been decided to send the elder was very sick, and she had seen him in a dream, a peculiar coat which he wore helping her to remember him. He had ministered to her, and she was made whole. Yeah, that's another one of those missionary moments, yeah? As president of the Mexican mission, Elder Teasdale was greatly beloved by those over whom he presided, and many incidents are related of his kindness. Not only did he visit among the poor, the sick, and the downcast, and aid them with his cheering words, but although not rich himself, his purse was always open to those who were in need. Okay, so they've already mentioned the European mission, and now they're mentioning the Mexican mission. Geez, how many missions did this dude preside over? Like, George Teasdale, you were busy. Okay. But notwithstanding his kindness, he can rebuke his brethren and sisters when occasion requires. It is quite noticeable that in a mild, quiet way he makes his decisions and usually brings people to his way of thinking. But he has the firmness, when firmness is required, to carry his ideas out. George Teasdale was born in London, England, on the 8th of December, 1831. I didn't know that. I didn't know he was British. His parents were William Russell and Harriet Henrietta Tidy Teasdale. Okay. Being naturally of a studious and thoughtful disposition, he obtained the best education that could be had at the public schools in the London University. After leaving school, he entered the office of an architect and surveyor. He did not remain in this employment long, owing to the dishonesty of the employer. Later, he learned the upholstering business. Well, that's quite, diverse. You went from being an architect to being an upholsterer. I don't really feel like they have much in common, but okay. Although his mother was a member of the established Church of England, he was not at all impressed by the doctrines which were advanced, and was not confirmed into the church. Still, he received many impressions on religious subjects from his mother, and from his childhood up he was a student of the Scriptures. In the year 1851, he was 20, he learned for the first time something of the principles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This information came to him through a tract issued by the Tract Society of the Church of England, entitled Mormonism. Oh, interesting! It was a tract from a different church about this church. It's interesting because that's not usually how people find the church, but I guess it can happen. It is not at all strange that Brother Teasdale, with the great majority of people in the community in which he lived, should have been filled with prejudice against the Mormons. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He having, of course, heard of them being a low and degraded people. Shortly after this, a man who belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came to work at the establishment where Brother Teasdale was employed. Although this brother was a plain, unassuming man, he bore a powerful testimony, and there was no doubt in his mind as to the truthfulness of this work. His fellow workmen ridiculed him and argued with him, but he was never overcome. So impressive was this humble man's testimony that at least one of his associates was led to investigate the principles of the gospel as he explained them. Nice. Brother Teasdale became interested in this unpopular religion, and as is always the case, he met with opposition from his friends and acquaintances. Yeah, I don't think it's always the case today, but it can be, yeah. They endeavored to show him the folly of the step which they feared he was about to make, and told him that all his bright prospects for life would be ruined if he persisted in such a course. But when a mind such as that possessed by George Teasdale becomes convinced of the thing that is right, it requires more than the opposition of friends to turn it from its purpose. Therefore, without allowing their ridicule to alter his determination, he rendered obedience to what he knew was the law of God. After his baptism, August 8, 1852, he, like nearly all young converts, felt that many would believe his testimony. The gospel was so plain to him, as he had nothing to gain by testifying to something that was not true, he felt that all who heard him must be convinced. However, he learned by experience during his very early days in the church that it is a difficult matter to convert this generation to the truth. He was ordained a priest and later an elder, and spent much of his time in preaching and giving lectures on religious subjects. Well, I have to say something about his tenacity, yeah? I mean, if he was so determined to keep going that despite nobody really listening to him, he just kept going. So that's it. Pretty admirable. During this time, he learned how necessary it is to have the Spirit of the Lord in speaking on the principles of the gospel. He had very little time for study, and he tells us he was not naturally a speaker, his first efforts in that direction being total failures. But later, when he was called to go out to speak, he dedicated his labors to the Lord and asked his assistance, and of course was successful. While laboring in this way, Elder Teasdale made the acquaintance of Miss Emma Brown, and in the year 1853 they were married. From this time until her death in 1874, this good lady was a great help to her husband. In the course of his ministry in England, they had many trials to pass through. Oh, hang on. I'm sorry, I almost completely missed that. Okay, they were married in 1853, and she died in 1874, 21 years later. That's not that long. I mean, I was thinking like 50 years later, you know? That would have been 1903. No, this 1874, which was 21 years later. So, no, she didn't live long. That's pretty sad, actually. In the course of his ministry in England, they had many trials to pass through, trials of poverty, of being ridiculed by former friends, but through it all, Sister Teasdale was ever the true, consistent Latter-day Saint, helping her husband by her counsel and by the fortitude which she exhibited during all the trials through which they passed. Later in life, Elder Teasdale heard and, being converted to the principle, obeyed the law of plural marriage, taking good, faithful women as his wives. Yeah, that was quite common back in those days. His zeal in spreading the truth caused his selection as president of the Somerstown branch of the London Conference. Oh, wait a second. He took a second wife in England? I'm fairly certain that was illegal at the time. Alexa, when was bigamy outlawed in England?
From Answers.com. Bigamy became illegal in 1603 in England and Wales after an Act of Parliament.
1603. So it was illegal in England. So how in the world did he practice plural marriage if it was illegal to be married to another wife? Ooh, that's a good point. See, like half of the point of the plural marriage at the time was that it wasn't actually illegal in the U.S. until after the Mormons started practicing it. So, like they started in the 1840s and early 1840s, I want to say 1841, 1842, something like that. Anyways, and then it didn't become technically against the law until the 1860s. And at which time, the government made a big deal about it, which was a little bit overreacting in my opinion, but Elder Teasdale could not possibly have married his second wife in England because it was illegal. It's just a question. Like, I now have a question mark in my mind. If he did marry a second wife, where did he marry her? And under what jurisdiction? And was he allowed to bring her back to England? I don't know 100% if this is chronological, but I'm just asking the question, like, how did that work, like, logistically? His zeal in spreading the truth caused his selection as president of the Somerstown branch of the London Conference. In addition to this, he was clerk of the conference, auditor of the book agency accounts, and president of the Tract Distributing Association. With all these duties, his time was, of course, completely taken up, especially in view of the fact that his labor in these callings was entirely gratuitous, and he was compelled to devote a portion of his time to earning a livelihood. But in the year 1857, he was called upon to give his whole time to the work of the ministry. Obedience to this call required the giving up of an excellent position and the breaking up of a pleasant, comfortable home. Elder Teasdale had determined to devote his life to the work of God, and here was an opportunity for him to show how firm this determination was. He decided to accept the call, and in this course he was encouraged by his wife. He sold his possessions, made his wife as comfortable as possible, and entered upon his new duties. The peace and joy which always accompany the performance of religious duties were felt by him, and he greatly enjoyed his labors, presiding over the Cambridge Conference. Though often footsore and weary from his long walks, the Spirit of the Lord brought happiness to his heart. In 1858, he presided over 3 conferences in Wiltshire, Land's End, and South Conferences. In 1859, he was given charge of the Scottish Mission. In 1861, he was released to come to Zion. Here, another trial awaited him. 2 of his children had died, and 2 were still spared. From his long missionary labor, his means were all exhausted, and he and his family were compelled to make the ocean voyage in the steerage of an emigrant ship. His experience in crossing the plains with ox teams was much the same as that of others, which has now gone into history and is more or less familiar to all our readers. Yeah. So, in other words, it wasn't that fun. Yeah, it was not that fun. After his arrival in the valley, Elder Teasdale taught school for some time in the 20th Ward, and later took charge of President Young's merchandise store under the direction of Bishop H.B. Clawson. Having a very good tenor voice, he joined the Tabernacle and Ward choirs, and also the Salt Lake Dramatic Association. To this organization he was of great assistance, especially in the singing parts. That's cool, he's a singer. Yeah, I like that. In 1867, he was appointed to take charge of the General Tithing Office in Salt Lake City. Oh, that's a big responsibility. Sheesh. Okay. In 1868, he was called to go on a mission to Great Britain. Again, like you just came back from there, but go back, yeah? After being detained with some little time in New York assisting with the immigration, he sailed for England in company with elders Albert Carrington and Jesse N. Smith. who were going to preside over the European and Scandinavian missions. While on this mission, Elder Teasdale acted as assistant editor of the Millennial Star and developed into a vigorous writer. Returning to New York, he assisted Elder William C. Staines with the season's emigration and preached the gospel in that city and in the surrounding country. After his return to Zion from this mission, he accepted a position with the ZCMI, first in the drug department and afterwards with the produce department, where he was placed in charge and worked up a business amounting to several $100,000 per annum. Wow! That's impressive. During this time, he was kept busy with his duties in the church as home missionary and in visiting the Sunday schools and young people's associations. From 1875 to 1876, he preached the gospel in the southern states, principally in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. I'll bet that was funny. There's some British guy walking around, like, preaching the gospel in Tennessee. You know, like, I'm just saying, I think that's a little unusual, you know? In the summer of 1877, Elder Teasdale was called to preside over the Juab stake of Zion. Juab stake, that's in Utah, yeah? He was ordained a high priest and set apart for this position under the hands of President Brigham Young. He was engaged in the tithing office, took contracts for the construction of a portion of the Utah Southern Railroad, was president of the Nephi Cooperative Store, and was also connected with other enterprises. He served in 2 sessions of the legislature, 1880 and 1882. He's very busy, yeah? You feel like he has a lot going on. On the 13th of October, 1882, he was called into the quorum of the 12 apostles and was ordained by President John Taylor. From this time up to the present, Elder Teasdale's life has been almost entirely devoted to his calling in the church. When he has not been absent from home on foreign missions, he has spent his time in traveling among the stakes of Zion, preaching to the people and exhorting them to live lives of Latter-day Saints. In all his labors at home or abroad, he has always taken advantage of every opportunity to lift his voice against sin and iniquity, and to declare the glad message of great joy which is so dear to him. Throughout all his ministry, he has appeared to have the same spirit which was exhibited by Paul of old, when he said, "Woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel." Since his ordination to the apostleship, he has filled missions to the Indian Territory, the Southern States, Old Mexico, and Great Britain, where he presided over the European mission for 4 years. Yeah, that's pretty busy. While occupying this position, he traveled through France, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and the British Isles. I love how they love to list the countries he's been to. I mean, that's impressive enough, but slightly irrelevant. Yeah? I mean, he's going around preaching the gospel in Europe, and, like, as president of the mission, you're mostly giving conferences. You're speaking in state conference. You're not really, like, I don't know, you're not preaching yourself. You know what I mean? So I feel like it would be more impressive if he were preaching himself. But he's not. He's talking in state conferences and talking to members and boosting bishops and things like that. Like, he's not going around speaking all these languages. You know, it sounds almost like he is, the way they put it, but he's not. Yeah. He's British. He probably only speaks English. I don't know if he speaks another language. They didn't mention it. He went on a mission to Mexico, but as a mission president. Yeah? Like, I don't know how much Spanish he speaks. Anyways, I'm just throwing it out there. They're making it sound like it's more than he did. And when I feel like what he did do was impressive enough, yeah? You don't have to exaggerate it. I'm just saying. Okay, moving on. In Mexico, he did much toward the establishment of the colonies of our people. Being so far from the headquarters of the church, he was naturally looked to for advice and counsel by the members of the church in that land. All right, so in case you don't know, the church had a colony in Colonia Juarez. They may have had more than one, but I knew of that one particular. It was a whole Mormon colony. It was this whole, like, group of people from Utah, basically, who moved down to Mexico. And the reason was that because polygamy was illegal in the U.S., they were trying to go someplace where it would be more accepted. And so it was kind of a polygamous colony for a while anyway. But because of that, the Mexican mission was very important at the time. Like, very important. They wanted to establish and maintain their colonies that they had, which no longer exist, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, notwithstanding the years Brother Teasdale has spent in the missionary field and in laboring among the saints at home, he has felt at times that he was not reaching enough ears, and this feeling prompted him to write the tracts, Glad Tidings of Great Joy, and The Restoration of the Everlasting Gospel, thousands of which have been distributed by our missionaries in the world. Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, they didn't really have standardized ones back then. Elder Teasdale has always been greatly interested in the Sunday school work. While president of the Jueb stake, and he also acted as stake superintendent of Sabbath schools, and for some time he was the teacher of the primary class in the vestry of the Nephi Tabernacle. For several years past, he has been a member of the Deseret Sunday School Union Board. In his talks to the children, he endeavors to impress upon their minds the value of a well-spent life and the necessity of living near to the Lord, and in this connection reminds them of the importance of keeping the word of wisdom. He often gets the children to join him in singing the hymn written by Eliza R. Snow, In Our Lovely Deseret, and advises them to learn this hymn and to carry out in their lives the sentiments it contains. Yeah, I've read quite a bit of stuff from Eliza R. Snow. She's a bit preachy. I'm not super familiar with this one, but I do know that it used to be in the hymn book not even that long ago. In fact, it might still be. Oh yeah, hymn number 307. It still is. That's funny. I'm just going to read the words real quick because I'm not as familiar with them as I should be. In our lovely Deseret, where the saints of God have met, there's a multitude of children all around. They are generous and brave. They have precious souls to save. They must listen and obey the gospel sound. And the chorus is, Hark, 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 'tis children's music, children's voices, oh how sweet. When in innocence and love, like the angels up above, they with happy hearts and cheerful faces meet. Okay, but it is preachy, because listen to this. That the children may live long and be beautiful and strong, tea and coffee and tobacco they despise, drink no liquor, and they eat but a very little meat. They are seeking to be great and good and wise. Yeah, verse 3. They should be instructed young how to watch and guard the tongue, and their tempers train and evil passions bind. They should always be polite and treat everybody right, and in every place be affable and kind. And verse 4, they must not forget to pray night and morning every day for the Lord to keep them safe from every ill, and assist them to do right, that with all their mind and might they may love him and may learn to do his will. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but like it's a bit much, isn't it? Okay. It's so funny, like times were so different. Times were just so different. Because I recall having read this before and thinking it was weird. Yeah? And we all kind of feel that it's weird, don't we? But it's probably mostly because we didn't live in that time. And I don't know that it was weird at the time, but it is definitely solidly weird today. That's okay, though. So apparently this is Elder Teasdale's favorite hymn. Sure. Okay. One of the most striking characteristics of Apostle Teasdale is that he is always the same. Wherever you meet him, he has the same genial, quiet way which makes friends of all with whom he comes in contact. And one of the first impressions made on new acquaintances is that he is a man of God. I like that. That's good. He really gives off that vibe, yeah. His life has been so taken up with his spiritual duties that he takes more delight in conversing on this subject than on any other. Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh is well illustrated in the case of Apostle Teasdale. His heart is full of the gospel and a love for his fellow men, and knowing so well how the principles of truth have benefited him, and that mankind cannot do without them and make a success in this life, he takes delight in bringing these principles to their attention. On every question which comes before him for consideration, his first desire is to find out what the will of the Lord is on the subject, and few men are more tenacious than he in doing that what he understands the will of the Lord to be. Not only does Apostle Teasdale preach the gospel, but he endeavors in his daily life to show that he believes what he teaches. If an honest, upright life will benefit others, it will also benefit him. His life is spent, therefore, in striving by precept and example to lift mankind through the saving principles of truth to a higher plane. Hugh J. Cannon. Wow. Interesting. Like, I found that very interesting. So, if I may sum up, George Teasdale was born in England. He's joined the church there. And I'm just looking him up really quick on Wikipedia to make sure I didn't miss any major life events, keeping in mind that this was written in 1900 and that anything after that wouldn't have been in it. But that then he was called on many, many missions. And he was president of four different missions, yeah? And yeah, that's what I'm getting. That's mostly what he did. He was very mission oriented, and had at least 2 wives. I don't know. How many? Oh, it says on Wikipedia I had 7 children. All right, I'm gonna skim the article on Wikipedia and just fact check myself and make sure that that we didn't miss anything important. Don't think so. They kind of skip from his serving as president of the Mexican mission in 1891 to his death, which I think is weird because I'm sure there was something in between. I'm just saying. So the part about his death was Teasdale died in Salt Lake City at age 75 of an intestinal obstruction. He was buried at Salt Lake City Cemetery and was succeeded in the Quorum of the 12 by Anthony W. Ivins. He was called after the reorganization of the First Presidency and the death of Orson Pratt. Yeah, that's right. They had an empty space. So after they reorganized the First Presidency with John Taylor, then they had, I believe, 3 empty slots, and they only filled 2 of them at the time. And so they must have called him after that. Yeah. And then Orson Pratt died, and then they had to call 2 more. Yeah, I think that's how it went. So, anyways, George Teasdale, there you go. I learned a lot. Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot about him. I feel like I have an idea of who he was. Okay. Oh, there it has a little blurb on Wikipedia about his wife. His wife died in 1874 after he had fathered 7 children by her, 5 of whom died in infancy. That's horrible. The couple had been monogamous, but after Emily's death, he had 4 more recorded marriages, and possibly as many as 10 more, all without issue. Okay, so it sounds to me like he was very loyal to his first wife, yeah? And that he married other people, but he never really entered a relationship with them. I mean, that's what it sounds like. So these were kind of marriages in name only, yeah? Where he was supporting them financially, probably. But that also helps me to know, I mean, it says that he had practiced plural marriage, but then they were talking about him in London, and I got really confused thinking that he had married his second wife while still in London, but it looks like he didn't even marry his second wife until after the death of his first. Yeah? So, yeah, that would be perfectly legal. So, at least at the time. Anyways. Alright, I learned tons today. I think that was really interesting. I think he's a much more interesting character than we give him credit for. Yeah? I mean, who knew who George Teasdale is? Yeah? And I feel silly because I know a lot of the obscure apostles, but I didn't know him very well at all. So I do appreciate having learned a little bit more about him, and that he was all about missions and leading missionaries, and that he loved the song In Our Lovely Deseret. Yeah. Anyways, so I hope you enjoyed that as well. If you did, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.